When I was in the second grade, Billy Hutchins stood up one day during show and tell, and he said in a loud voice that his uncle was dead. He got run over by a car, Billy said. "Oh dear, how awful," Mrs. Quigley said. But Billy was smiling, happy, looking around at all of us, catching our reactions, proud of what he'd brought to show and tell. A dead guy, his uncle. Wow. He had nothing to show, but that was no drawback. He'd left that to our imaginations. Mrs. Quigley was shocked. We were stunned. He'd made his impression. The rest of us brought in gerbils and hamsters, petrified wood, autographed baseballs, and postcards from Florida. But Billy had topped us all. Instinctively, we knew we were licked. Nobody was ever going to beat a dead uncle. Billy had just entered the Show and Tell Hall of Fame. Years later, one summer while I was in college, I was part of a work crew clearing brush along a highway. It was hot, sweaty, dirty, dusty, endless, dispiriting work. We called ourselves the Chain Gang, and somewhere in the course of it, near the end of summer, one of the guys in the crew, Carl was his name, told me and Jackson, in a very offhand way, that he had killed somebody. "I killed a guy once," he said. Jackson said, "Why?" Carl said he was making love to the guy's wife when the guy burst into the bedroom and tried to brain him with a stick. He was a little guy, and he probably couldn't have hurt me, but he surprised me, so I grabbed my knife off the floor and stuck the bastard right in the heart. Did it before I could even think about it, Carl said. Big look of surprise on his face. Blood all over. "What'd his wife do?" Jackson said. "Screamed. On account of you or him?" "Him, I guess." Jackson loved to screw with Carl. Carl tried to recover his edge. "The guy was dead as a rock before he ever hit the floor. I don't know what he was so pissed about. I was paying her. It would have been his money, too." Hearing this, I was bug-eyed. I was certain that Carl wasn't bluffing. He said he'd never forget it because of the way his knife had locked up in the guy's body, like it had become a part of him and didn't want to come out. "Just like my cock," Carl said, laughing carelessly. "That never wanted to come out either." I was speechless. Jackson said, "What about his wife? Did you finish fucking her?" Carl laughed. "Nah," he said. "He wrecked it for me. She got all upset and started to cry. I can't fuck anything that's crying." Jackson said, "My old lady cries sometimes when I'm fucking her." Carl lit a cigarette and said, "No shit, I'd cry too." Jackson asked him if he'd ever been caught for killing the guy, and Carl said no. Jackson asked him how come, and Carl laughed some more and said it was in Vietnam during the war. "I paid her and left," he said. "That's all there was to it." "What'd you pay her for if you never finished fucking her?" Jackson said. "I figured it was the least I could do after killing her old man," Carl said. Prompted by this story, Jackson, that's the only name I ever heard him called, said that he'd never killed anybody, but once he'd had a friend, his best buddy in the whole world, he said, and he'd fucked the guy's wife, his girlfriend, and his daughter. I laughed out loud in shock and disbelief and shook my head, and he must have taken that as a challenge because he repeated it defiantly, proudly, and with something that sounded almost like wonder. "I fucked my best friend's wife, his girlfriend, and his daughter," he said. "Where was his mother?" Carl, the killer, said. Carl loved to screw with Jackson. "She was dead," Jackson said. "Which one was the best?" said Carl. Jackson took a moment to consider that. "None of them was much to speak of," he said, "but I guess maybe his wife was the best. She was a screamer. And she had a nice ripe pair of great big old tits on her. She was fucking built." "How old was the daughter?" Carl said. 15, 16. Jailbait, man. Hey, she wanted me to. She was all over me. She a virgin? Shit, I don't know, Jackson said, and he laughed. Not when I got done with her. "You can tell. She know what to do?" "What's to do?" Jackson said. He was getting impatient with the questions. "She laid there and I fucked her. I fucked her and I fucked her and her old lady and his girlfriend too. I fucked all three of them." Carl took a drag on his cigarette and let the smoke hang in his mouth like a cloud. Then he sucked it up his nose. He liked to do that, and blow smoke rings, watch them float away. I was wary of Carl before I heard about the stabbing. After that, I couldn't wait for us to go our separate ways. But he did have a funny sense of humor. After he exhaled his smoke, he said to Jackson, "I'd say the one you really fucked was your buddy." We had a good laugh over that, and then they were looking at me, like it was my turn to come up with a good one. I didn't have a good one. I took a plant, a little cactus, into Mrs. Quigley's show and tell. They were both older than I was, and they had scars and tattoos. Carl had fought in the war. Jackson had done time in prison. I couldn't match that. I had nothing to say. They let me off. They didn't screw with me much. I wasn't worth it. I was second grade all over again. Two guys who just admitted to doing horrible things, and I was the one who felt I'd come up short. Now I'm a tax planner. Hold on. I've got something to say.